I thought for years, I thought Don Reno hung the moon. I had never seen, and it wasn't necessarily as a banjo player in his case, even though he did. I mean, he was so far advanced of anywhere that I was during that period of time that there's a lot of his music I just, I didn't understand it because it wasn't something that was natural to me. But what got me about him and all through the thing is I actually saw him on stage. And, I often tell people that the worst thing that ever happened to Don Reno was the last 10 years that he played. Because a lot of people only saw him during that period of time. They didn't see what he was when he was with Red Smiley. I mean, the first country music show I ever saw was in Spartanburg, South Carolina. Homer Israel and Boomer Long took me down to see that. And it was on the show. We walked in the auditorium, and Flatt and Scruggs were doing the Martha White theme to open up their show. They opened the show. And then Mother Maybelle Carter came out, and they played with her and did a short set. Then there was an intermission, and Bill Anderson, the country star, had a #1 record out at that point called Still. And they were playing that on the charts. And so he comes on, starts right after the intermission, and then Reno and Smiley came on. And I found out later, I never could understand that. Here's a guy with a #1 hit record, and he's not the one closing the show. But I found out later on that all those country guys that knew Carlton and knew of Reno and Smiley would write in their contracts they would not follow Don Reno and Red Smiley's show because it was such an act. And, I mean, Don not only had the thing about being an extremely innovative banjo player, but that thing that Snuffy Jenkins was, that comedian. When Don went into the Chicken Hot Rod, he would sneak off the stage in a while, and Red Smiley would do something. He and the rest of the band would play something, and Don would come back dressed up as Chicken Hot Rod and start the routines. And then one by one, the other members of the band would disappear, and they'd get in their garb, too. And Red Smiley, dressed in drag, he was Pansy Hot Rod. And then one of them was Jeff Dooltater. That was Mac McGahey. And John Palmer was Mutt High Pockets. And the four of them, it was like watching the Marx Brothers. And they had these routines built up. And I'll swear to God, and it was like, Don explained to me one time, it's like taking your audience for a ride on a roller coaster. And he programmed it out when he did his shows. His shows were all about establishing that link with an audience. And I found out later on with Monroe was, to a degree, that was the most important thing about being a live performer is the rapport you're building up with that audience. And it's where I learned to, I love to play some of my tunes like 40 Years Late and Rural Retreat and some of those things. But when I get in front of an audience, they don't really mean anything to me. The tune doesn't mean anything sort of at all. If somebody hollers for Foggy Mountain Breakdown, I'd as soon play that as I would to play one of my tunes. Because what you're playing, the music is just a vehicle for enhancing that interaction between the audience and the performer, And the tune really don't matter. It dawned on me after playing Mule Skinner Blues to open every show for 4 years running that I played in. And I never got tired of it. And it was 10 years after I quit the band that I figured out why not, in hindsight, and understanding that those tunes are just vehicles to express for an emotional, expressing that emotional moment that exists between the performer and the audience. And that was a wonderful thing to learn.